Natalie Brunell for Bitcoin Magazine, and today I'm super excited to be chatting with writer, philosopher, podcaster, and entrepreneur Aleks Svetski, who's a contributor to Bitcoin Magazine. We're going to be talking about the remnant, the masses, and the parasites. What does that mean? Let's hear from Aleks. Aleks, thank you so much for joining me today. I love your articles in Bitcoin Magazine, and one of the most recent ones that I think made a huge impact that you've done interviews on is the remnant, how Bitcoiners are the remnant, and then there are the masses. I know you're working on a follow-up article, so I want to talk to you a little bit about both. For people that didn't read that first article, first let's do a refresher. Who are the remnant and who are the masses?
So what I was going to say before was that I was sitting down having lunch with Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum, and we're planning on how to put everyone into gulags. And then I came up, I'm joking. Your face is like, what is going on here? No, it's the idea of the remnant is, so I'm not Klaus Schwab. I can't even say his name. I was where that came from was I was called Klaus Schwab's spawn by someone after reading that article. So clearly I triggered some people. But that aside, where the actual idea comes from really is it's a biblical term or a reference. Kind of the idea of that after every great catastrophe, whether it was the flood with Noah, whether it was the plagues or whatever else was happening to people back in the day where they kept just dying from things, there was always like a group of people who remained. They were the remnant. And the thing about the remnant that was interesting is that they didn't just luckily survive. Like obviously through every great catastrophe, some people get lucky along the way, but there is an archetype of person who survives because they prepare, because they're prudent, because they're producers, because they're sovereign, they're sufficient. There's a bunch of characteristics or traits that these people who remain post catastrophe seem to have. And there was an essay written in the 1930s by a guy called Albert Nock, called Isaiah's Job. And that essay inspired, everyone from Rothbard to Ayn Rand, all sorts of things like that. And the person who introduced me to that was Francis Pouliot. And he kind of, he mentioned it to, so me, him, Russell Okung, and a couple other guys were having dinner at Bitcoin 2021 at Safe's, kind of at the carnivory dinner where I didn't see you.
I know,
Apparently,
I was there.
you were there too.
Yeah.
Don't know how that happened. So yeah, that's where we kind of, where Francis was like asking the table, like, who's read this? And like everyone kind of like blank stared at him. He's like, what the fuck is wrong with you people? So anyway, I had it on my reading list for ages. And when I finally read it, it just rung so true with me because I just had this inkling of, I've always strived to be a 1%er myself. And I think that striving to be in the 1% is a noble act. And what's happened is the language over the decades, and particularly since the rise of the stupidity that is democracy, has been that the 1% is somehow like the bad people, and the evil people. And it's been conflated with this word elite, where traditionally the designation of elite is a person who is exceptional at something, not a fucking parasite. And anyway, like I wrote an article 2 years ago called In Support of the Elite, where I tried to like reframe, the phrasing and all this sort of stuff. And anyway, long story short, to try and like tie it back to this piece that I wrote, was that I read this, it rung true. The idea was that the remnant is like these people who are of higher character, stronger character, better values. And for me, Bitcoiners embody that kind of archetype, that kind of character. And I tried to discuss that in the article against a backdrop of a mindless masses who just go with whatever they're fucking told, and don't actually think things through. And I tried to like make a really strong differentiation between the two, which clearly triggered some people, which is good.
Well, I was very moved by this philosophy and this sort of comparison. In fact, I've been talking about it. I go on speaking engagements now and I've brought it up to people and said, you need to check out this article, because to me, what I got out of it is the remnant, which I think you've mentioned before could even be like 20% of the population. Like it's not even necessarily 1%, but they're the ones that are driven by freedom, self-determination, fulfilling, the potential that each one of us has. They're the producers. They produce value for society. And then there's the biggest chunk of the population, which are the masses, which are the, if you want to be sort of negative about it, the sheeple, right? Who just, they're looking for a follower, they're looking for a direction to go. And you can kind of start to think about who those people are in the pandemic. And then there are the parasites, who are, you said, the failed remnant. And so they're trying to sway the masses because they're saying, hey, it's the reason you're unhappy or the reason that you're disadvantaged is because of the remnant. They screwed you. We're going to come with us and we'll help you. We'll get back at them. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Because you get deeper into this whole philosophy with your new article, right?
You are actually the first person who's seen an early draft of that. So I think what I failed to do in the first piece was I really took a hammer and beat over the head the idea of like the masses, and you don't want to be part of the mindless herd, right? Like, I mean, we've seen it in everything from sci-fi movies about zombies. Like, what do the zombies represent? The fucking masses, right? Like that's what it is. And the remnant is who remains after the virus spreads through the world. And it's like the remnant are the people who are still alive and thrive. But what I missed out on was like, there is a class of people who want to weaponize the sheep against the productive members of society. And I was trying to think of a name for them. And obviously people, in their mindlessness call them the elites. And it's like, well, no, that's wrong. So what's a good name for them? And I thought, okay, what kind of entity extracts value from a system without putting it back in? And I was like, parasite. Okay, so let's call them that. I was thinking turds as well, but turds like have a use. So like a parasite just keeps sucking the blood out of the system. So that's kind of the terminology that I use there. And I guess a good way to kind of think about the dynamic between the three archetypes is actually on the way to Kansas, as I was driving there, I was orange pilling the Uber driver, as we all Bitcoiners do. And he actually told me something which was quite poignant, I think. He said, politicians, which are a general class of parasite, are the kind of person who will tell the masses that they'll go to the remnant, so they'll go to the productive members of society, and they'll say, don't worry, we're going to protect you from all of these crazy people who are trying to take your stuff. Like, we're going to protect you from the horde, from the masses. And then they'll turn around and they'll tell the masses that it's those guys who are stealing all your wealth, and they're making all the money at your expense. And they'll promise both to protect them from each other. And in the middle, they'll just sort of extract a fee. So that's kind of the dynamic, or the archetype between the dynamic between the three archetypes of people. And for me, it's like, there are people, and that's what I try and do in this new article, is I try and like think about it psychologically. It's like, who is the kind of person who becomes a parasite? And it's either someone who can't compete with the remnant archetypes. It's like what I tried to term a failed remnant. So it's like someone who got beaten in the free market of merit. So they're like, oh, well, fuck it. I'm just going to like go into politics and just steal from someone through regulatory arbitrage. Or it could also be a member of the masses who is like just so filled with envy that they want to just take and steal and rob. And instead of kind of working alongside someone who is, naturally functional and good, and kind of like have a master apprenticeship relationship and actually grow into becoming one of the remnant, they want the quick path to riches or whatever, they become a parasite and they try and siphon value instead of doing the proof of work that's required to evolve from an apprentice to a remnant, to a master.
Yeah, so I think it's safe to say that among the parasites are the government bureaucrats, politicians, central bankers. And you don't have to name names, but can you just kind of illustrate how you see this playing out right now where we are in 2021 in society, the remnant, the masses, the parasites?
Yeah, so I guess we're seeing it, I guess, play out. Like if Bitcoiners are an example of the remnant, and then as I've tried to describe in this new one, there's like the dormant remnant, the active remnant, and then the radical remnant. And I guess they're the easiest way to describe them is they're the producers, like they're the entrepreneurs, they're the doers, they're the tinkerers, they're the engineers, they're the artists. They're actually creating and producing something, and they actually have some sort of they're purpose driven, right? And they're kind of the active ones, I guess, are the Bitcoiners, right? Because they've kind of woken up and they've realized. And it's funny because if you do the math, like 20% of 20% is 4%. And what's the penetration of Bitcoin globally? Somewhere in the 1 to 4% range. So it's kind of like maybe there's something interesting there. And it's like they're awake enough to know that something like Bitcoin is a way to I guess, restructure the system so that parasitic behavior can't be rewarded. But so that's what they're doing. Then you've got the masses, so the sheeple, are fundamentally unhappy with life. They know and they can see that everything around them is becoming more and more uncertain, and they're looking for an enemy, much like what happened in Weimar Germany, right? And then you had a parasite like Hitler rise up, blame the productive members of society, and turn the hordes, the masses, onto them. So it's like that same sort of dynamic. And I mean, you've got people like that dude that I saw on a video the other day on Twitter, like taking a photo of a child not wearing a mask, and then got chased around in the shop by the dad, right? Like, and just freaking, I'm doing this to stay alive, with his 18 masks on. It was just like complete mindlessness. So that's sort of what they're doing, and they're like completely lost. Like they're lost. That they don't know what they're doing. They're being lied to. So they have this like real cognitive dissonance between like what is reality and what is fake. Like I kind of think of them as like the Roomba, the automatic vacuum cleaner. There's like sort of hitting a wall. And that's sort of all they're doing. And then you have the parasitic class, and for them, like the world has become like, I guess, in the same way as a parasite would thrive in a really dirty environment, like in a real moldy kind of environment, the parasites grow in that. Like that's what the world we're living in now. It's like it's a fiat, it's a cancerous fiat world, and they're thriving at the moment. Like they're literally just sucking value, whether it's through printing money, whether it's through borrowing from the future, whether it's through blanket mandates and blind, bullshit like that, whether it's through, you know, taxing unrealized capital gains. Like how much of a parasite do you need to be to concoct that in your mind? Like seriously. So they're doing everything they can to try and like leech and extract, and obviously using the tools at their disposal to weaponize the masses against the people who are actually producing the ever diminishing amount of wealth in the world. And yeah, like it's a fucking scary time to be alive. So that's kind of what's happening. I have a view of where it's going, but like that's what's happening.
Well, okay, so this question might lead into where it's going, because I think that even by saying the word weaponize, you're almost setting up the idea of a clash, right? We have the remnant on one side, we have the parasites on the other, and we have the masses in the middle that are so important because they're going to almost decide the future. And they can go on Noah's Ark, which I kind of compare Bitcoin to, right? And they can opt out freely into this peaceful revolution, or they can be led down the wrong direction, and that scares me as well. So where do you see this all going?
Yeah. Okay. So do you want the optimistic one or the pessimistic one?
Both.
Okay. All right. So let's start with the pessimistic one. The pessimistic one is that we literally have uh, kind of totalitarian, gulaggy type, globalist, interconnected, world coin driven,
Centralized.
you know,
Central authority, yeah.
centralized-ish type, groups. And I mean that WorldCoin thing was such a stupid, idea, but such a thing for the masses, right? Like everyone's going to get one coin of the WorldCoin, and we, the founders of WorldCoin, are going to keep 20%. It's just written there in plain English, and people are like, yay, we got a free coin. And all I have to do is give you my biometrics so that you can completely control what I do with my money. So anyway, so I think the pessimistic version is that we're going to have a broadly, large scale technological gulag kind of system, mixture of Brave New World and, 1984. And we'll have these sort of pockets of hope and pockets of brilliance, shall we call them, of like bastions of freedom, which wealth is concentrated, productivity is concentrated, intelligence is concentrated, emotional intelligence is concentrated, and a lot of Bitcoin will be held there. And we may be kind of similar to special economic zones in broken countries, like what's happening in Honduras at the moment. Is like you got this big fuck up of a country, but with like these special economic zones which prosper within there, and they are actually dependent on the value that these zones produce in order for the rest of the country to subsist. So that's kind of like the pessimistic version. We kind of have like slaves and free people basically, and the version of the slaves is kind of like the Wallies, the people on the ship on the movie Wall-E, like they're kind of plugged into their little screen,
and they're all so fat.
Exactly. That's literally what it is. So, they'll have their VR fucking headsets on, and they'll have their intravenous, like, Pfizer branded, like, nutrition system, like, flowing through their veins. And like, that's kind of them, they'll be own nothing and be empty in the metaverse. And then we'll have sort of
But you're
human
safe. There's a sense of safety and security in that, right? That's why people go that way.
Yeah. Drugged into submission, right? So that's kind of like where they'll be. And the thing is, like, even in the bad case scenario, like on the other end, over time, like nature heals anyway. And what will happen is, they obviously won't reproduce, they think their brain in a vat idea is a good idea, because they're too ignorant to understand that the brain actually emerged from the body. So you can't separate the metaphysical and the physical. So they'll basically obsolete themselves and breed themselves out. But we'll have to go through quite an extended period of shit. And unfortunately, instead of just the tough times ending with our generation, the tough times will probably end with either our children or our children's children generation. So that's the worst case. The best case is that Bitcoin becomes such a standard so quickly, and that it kind of in its appreciation, the Noah's Ark is strong enough to bring on a large enough group of people that we can actually create large enough parallel economies, parallel systems, parallel jurisdictions, so that it's hard for us to be isolated. And all that'll do is I think it'll just shorten the time frame. So it'll mean like a real rough period. So we're still going to get slave money. We're still going to get freedom money. We're still going to get gulags. We're still going to get all that. But maybe instead of that lasting 30, 40, 50 years, it might only last 10 years. So I think that's really the differentiator here is the timing.
Okay. So when are you going to release this article, and what else do you want to share about it? Where can people find it?
Ooh, okay. So it will be on Bitcoin Magazine, of course. Hopefully I'll finish it today. So that, hey, if you want to give some feedback to it, it'll help me finish it today. So there's we'll get like some Polish, input in there, right? So
I'm in the Polish Remnant for sure. For sure.
Yeah. So we'll hopefully try and finish that today. And then I guess it'll be out next week. So there's that. What else can I tell people? Actually, really, really important is the fourth edition of the Bitcoin Times, which is the once a year publication I do with some really cool people. This year it's me, Brandon Quidham, Alan Farrington, Peter St. Ongi, and Craig Warmke. Was there one more? Oh, and Thomas Strolite, who did like a fictional piece in there. So it's going to be 6 of us. It's really, really cool piece. So that will be out for Christmas. So we're almost finished that. And as of next year, we're going to actually finally put them into print, because I finally got someone to give me a hand with, actually turning these into printed versions. So there'll be like high quality, limited edition prints. There's only going to be a particular run of each, and we're only ever going to do 21 editions. And after the 21 editions, it's done. So it'll be like one of those historic things where you want to collect them all. So anyway, that's coming out, and obviously the Remnant piece is coming out. So that's my public service announcement for today.